Hello, friends at the Macular Society. It's really good to get the chance to talk to you again. I only wish actually it was face to face because I've always enjoyed my visits to your regional groups in the past and indeed some of your national meetings as well. The organisation always seems to have a warm and positive vibe about it. And I think we've always had a good relationship really between yourselves and In Touch, the Radio 4 programme that I do. I've talked to many of your groups in the past, and one of them or two of the stories I may tell may ring a slight bell with some of you. I've tried to vary them a little, even if that means tinkering with the truth. I think enjoyment is more important than the truth here. Um, it's interesting because many of you, of course, have lost your sight over a period of time, and some of you perhaps quite recently. And this is a strange world in some ways, the world of visual impairment. I mean, just some of the things that you probably before this happened to you wouldn't have expected. For example, the number of talking machines that we have to have now to run our lives. So everything talks, your computer, your smartphone, the more mundane things, your scales, kitchen and bathroom. I mean, did you know, for example, you can get talking settings on your central heating now? Almost certainly can't afford the gas or the electricity that it offers you, but at least you can listen to it talk and have a go at it for the ridiculous costs that you're having to pay. I sometimes indulge actually in a bit of a fantasy that when we visually impaired people go to bed, all the talking machines wake up and talk to each other, probably have a party where they gossip about those strange visually impaired people that they believe they are helping. Actually, I always remember when I first got a talking microwave. I mean, this is quite a long time ago now. It must be about 30 years or so. And having a house full of talking objects can have its strange consequences. So I got this talking microwave and we put it on the table where it was supposed to go. But I hadn't told the rest of the family. Now, of course, the talking microwave has all sorts of things on it, including telling you how long you should cook things and timers and so forth. And it's also got a clock. And it happened that the first night that we'd got it there, my daughter, who I suppose was about 16 or at the time, was out on the razzle. And she got in fairly late and decided to try not to wake us up, so she didn't put any lights on. She came in, she was walking around and she walked into this microwave, which then said, "It's 2:45." It frightened the living daylights out of her, and you could imagine it adding, if it had had the vocabulary, "What the hell have you been doing out at this time of night?" So anyway, they are very strange, these machines, and they do some odd things. I have always been rather careful about giving your group any kinds of advice because, of course, I'm in many ways in a different situation to most of you in the sense that I was born blind, and that is a very different experience from losing sight. And in many ways, probably I'd be the worst person to give advice because I've not experienced sight. I don't know what you have lost. Indeed, I feel I've been incredibly lucky as a blind person. I had parents who adapted very well to what was for them a completely unexpected situation. Probably the most fortunate thing that happened to me is that I had an elder blind brother. Now, you may think, well, why is that good? But of course, the fact of the matter is he was able to do things and experiment with things. And my parents learnt from him what was possible. So, in fact, I was probably less held back than I might otherwise have been. I was very lucky to learn Braille and be successful at it. And I eventually got the job that I absolutely love. I've had a happy marriage. I've got children that I still get on with. As I say, I've been incredibly lucky. And the reason I'm telling you this is that we often hear about the statistics which suggests that the fear of loss of sight is perhaps the greatest fear that people have about disabilities, greater than hearing, greater than mobility loss. And I must say that always makes me very sad, because I do know the many things that are still possible, even when sight fades or even goes completely. And it's often just a matter of doing things differently, which takes us back to those talking machines, for example, which, you know, there are many alternative ways of doing stuff. And so quite often the solutions are about getting the right equipment. I said I wouldn't give advice, but I can't resist giving one piece of advice, which is, because you are still the same person you were despite the losses of vision. Your interests are the same, the enthusiasms should be the same, and the kind of person you are is the same. And there are ways to go on enjoying them. So, you know, what I suppose my message to people is embrace the changes. And if there's one piece of advice that I would dare to give, it is never be afraid to ask for help. One of the things that worries me most actually about visually impaired people, and not only people who've lost their sight relatively recently, but sometimes people like me who've been born blind, is this resistance to asking for help when you need it. You know, there's this sense perhaps that people have, that there's a sense of failure there, that somehow that you ought to be able to deal with every situation. And not asking for help, so often it wastes so much time, and in some cases it can prevent you from doing the things that you really want to do. And the reason I say never be afraid to ask for help is that people like helping. Believe me, people get a real buzz from being helpful. So I always feel when, for example, in the street that I ask for help, I mean, quite often the biggest problem I have is persuading people to go away, not actually to help. They want to take over for the rest of the day. And I'm sure you understand that, because there is a real pleasure in giving help, and you can complicate your life enormously by not asking for it when you really need it. Of course, the trouble with accepting help is that you do have to answer some of the daft questions that people ask when they are helping you. In my case, perhaps the most annoying is, where's your dog? There is this assumption that blind people must have a guide dog. Of course, some do, but it's about 5,000 out of about 350,000 registered blind or partially sighted people. So, but it does seem that people believe that blind people were born rather like Siamese twins with a guide dog strapped to your thigh. Now, there's only the time for the short version of this story, but one of my most enjoyable moments was when, on being asked by a man who was helping me at Oxford Circus tube station, who asked, "Where's your dog then, mate?" I replied, before really I'd had time to think, "Oh my God, I must have left it on the train." The chaos that ensued was delicious. But that is another story. Suffice it to say that when the man helping me rushed to tell staff that a blind man had left his guide dog on the train, the entire Bakerloo line was brought to a juddering halt while they looked for this, in fact, non-existent dog. Now, just to end, I do want a bit of help from you. Much there's a lot going on at the moment in the world of visual impairment and in terms of treatment of eyesight problems, drug therapies, stem cell surgery, gene therapy, many exciting things. Now, we've always on In Touch, we rather fought shy of the miracle cure stories. Papers love them, of course. Quite often radio and television loves them. But we on In Touch have always feared the raising false hopes syndrome. And we know that these techniques of treatment often take much longer than is being advertised to develop. They often are going to reach fewer people than is admitted at the time when they do come on stream. And indeed, sometimes they don't come off at all. But some do. And there are increasing signs that progress is being made in the treatment of many eye diseases. And the other day, I got gently reprimanded for favouring not raising false hopes over what my critic called informed optimism. And he said he thought we should be doing more of the informed optimism and not be quite so frightened of raising false hope. And I want to know what you think about that. Now, if I were ending In Touch at this point, I would now say you can email In Touch at bbc.co.uk, or you can leave your voice messages on 0161 836 133. So I say it now. I would really like to know what you feel about that. Are we in danger sometimes of being too cautious about giving information about medical developments, or are we right to fear the medical cure? On the side of informed optimism, you could always bear in mind the famous jazz pianist George Shearing, who was asked by an interviewer, "Mr. Shearing, how have you been blind all your life?" And his reply, "Not yet." Perhaps that's the best definition of informed optimism you can have. It's been lovely talking to you. If you ever have, carry on listening to In Touch. If you never have, why don't you give it a try? 8:40 Tuesday evenings, Radio 4, or for the really tech savvy, on BBC Sounds. Thank you very much for allowing me to come into your meeting.